Bonjour. Bonjour à toutes, bonjour à tous. Bonjour et bienvenue.
Good morning to all and welcome. We're very pleased, the Convergence team and myself, to be gathered here at last. It's been a long time. Gathered here in Paris within this magnificent Brongniart Palace, which we miss so much. Gathered everywhere also in the world, and since we're all the links of the same chain, we're connected. We are capillarized among all those who are watching us, listening to us, and will be able to interact with us online thanks to our digital platform in dozens of countries, hundreds of territories, and thousands of cities. It's an immense pleasure and privilege to speak to you all, individuals, each one from his or her own culture, and to officially open this first edition of the World Forum Zero Exclusion, Zero Carbon, Zero Poverty. A first edition that's towards a common goal to combine the social, environmental, and economic goals at stake, pillars of the sustainable development, pillars of the 3-0. This monument in which we are working is symbolic. The Brongniart Palace was the first Paris Stock Exchange. Symbolic because it's here we're going to exchange today and tomorrow about the transformation of our models of society. This monument, we know it well, and it knows us as well. Since this forum is not our first, but it follows 12 annual editions of the World Forum Convergence. As a matter of fact, since 2008, our association Convergence, which was born from the International Cooperation and Solidarity, embodies a vision and a path for the future, a path towards construction, a path of multiplayer partnerships serving the common good. Along those 13 years, companies, investors, public players, academia, NGOs, and civil society organizations have taken up our call and have transformed this forum a laboratory for multiplayer action. Over these 2 days, with more than 200 experts, it's been acknowledged by the Agenda 2030 to enable the resources for partners for development. So the thinking we've been doing all over the year, we are not alone to try to implement them, but with hundreds of member organizations of our work groups, both in France and in several countries over the world. They are feeding us. They are feeding our work groups, which are our strength and enable us to show how to implement this path for the future, valuing initiatives and innovations of people on the ground. Along the last years, this unavoidable principle of combination of the 3 pillars of sustainable development is a central pillar in the thinking and the words of players involved in all economic sectors. Since the beginning of last year, the world has been struck by an unbelievable crisis, already struck by economic crisis for the most vulnerable, but not only them. The effect of climate change are getting out of control, and there too consequences and impacts the most vulnerable, but not only them. Transformation will enable us to get to an inclusive and sustainable world for the majority are more urgent than ever. More efficiently, those transformations, Convergence has chosen to evolve in its goal. The editorial line of this forum is already around the concrete implementation of the principle of 3-0. Thus, To embody this new dynamics, the Convergence Forum is becoming the 3-0 Forum. After championing this cause, which has become more mature, Convergence is choosing to advocate social, environmental, and economic goals. Through this change, the end is replacing the means. Along these 2 days, with more than 200 experts, we're going to take part in around 50 roundtables and workshops accessible to thousands of participants. We're going to champion this cause across great subject matters: a transformation of economic models of organization, international cooperation and solidarity, social innovation and the fight against inequalities, climate actions and environmental protection, harnessing citizen action and youth mobilization, territorial innovations at the service of the transitions. To address those issues, I'm giving the floor my most intimate partners within Convergence, which are both in the south and in the north, the pillars, and who work together to build a world with zero exclusion, zero carbon, and zero poverty. Frédéric Roussel, the head of the CEO of Convergence and co-founder of the World Alliance 3.0, Luis Oquiñena, president of Gawat Kalinga and co-founder of the World Alliance 3.0, and Alexandra Mixotakis, the founder of the World Human Forum. Well, thank you very much. I'll try to be very brief. I know now that differently from the former editions of the forum, I'm speaking to you within this room and through the camera to all those who are listening to us around the world. I couldn't speak both in French and English. Je vais
very happy for the first time to be able to speak to you directly, and I hope you will be able to follow this forum thanks to the streamline we are going to put in place in the 2 coming days, and I really welcome you. Pour revenir à ce que tu...
To come back to what you were saying, 13 years ago when we launched Convergence, it seemed important to us when this message wasn't about the whole society, to insist on the end of the silo thinking, and that we all, players from the social society or public players, needed to work together towards a better world, a world we could combine the contradictory equation of a greener world, more apt to survive the humankind, and a less poor world with the growth which can enable everyone to get a decent life without exhausting the natural resources of our planet. So how could we could combine and hold this contradiction? I don't say we succeeded in finding a new way. As Thibault has just said in his introductory speech, we decided after 12 years to take a next step. We're not only speaking of being the speaker of convergence that already exists on the ground in action towards 3.0, or to be inspiring for others, but rather to act rather concretely on the question of the 3.0, zero carbon, zero exclusion, and zero poverty. That's why we wanted to introduce our World Alliance on 3.0 with only 2 members, but 012 we have already gone forward. So NGO from the south, represented by Gawa Kalinga, and a humanitarian French NGO, Acted, which is very largely represented in this very room. This World Alliance 3.0 is ambitious, wants to be global, and want to go beyond 3 members within 1 year. And it will take part, although modestly, but significatively in the awareness, on trying to raise this awareness about climate change. We're all different, we all speak different languages, but to face COVID, we are all human beings. And to fight climate change, we're all human beings. And for all those of you who don't work in the humanitarian sector, we remain all human beings. They asked me to speak a few words to the audience.
To speak French. Then for the English speakers, I assume right now the French is on the screen. I hope so, at least, yes. If not, you will receive it tomorrow. Okay. I have been requested to say a few words in a foreign language, not in English, because my English is a disaster. And since I come back from Afghanistan and Kabul during 1 month, I will maybe say a few words to my Afghan colleagues. My Persian being what it is, I try to write what I'm supposed to say. Dostan Aziz, Salam. Afghanistan Daryak Boran Jadid Ast. Maba Mardom Afghanistan Astim Wa Meganem. Dar Shoma Ba Darke Mekanam. امید دارم که بخیر مشکل al شمید. باز با شما هستیم. Malgré tout, nous sommes avec vous. Je répète ce que je viens de dire.
I repeated what I actually said. Thank you very much.
Et je cède la parole.
And now I will give the floor to the other founding pillar of the alliance, Ms. Piñana, representing of an exceptionally efficient and brilliant organization contributing to the transformation of the Philippines.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, maybe it's the mask. Good evening, good afternoon, I guess. Is this good morning? I'm so sorry. See, we are truly living in extraordinary times. It demands extraordinary efforts from all of us. I thank you for coming over. In your own way, you are a bright spot. You are that bright star, what's seemingly a dark cloud that is hovering humanity. And today, this morning, we dream of connecting those bright stars and become a constellation that can inspire nations, that we can all work together. And this is, I believe, one hope, one goal of 000, that in the years to come, we can put value to 0. That there is actually value to 0. I flew 14 hours to spend this day with you in exchange for 20 days of quarantine. 20 days. And 20 days of worry for my family. But then again, I ask myself, if the future of 0 is worth fighting for, 0 exclusion, 0 poverty, and 0 carbon, I believe it's all worth it. And it gives me so much, not just pride, but encouragement, seeing you all here. just wanting to, I guess, understand better 000, wanting to appreciate each other, how things or how we are doing things in our own area of missions. Today we are reaping the mistakes for climate and for poverty and for exclusion. But to me, the greatest mistake is inaction. If we don't do nothing. And I believe this 3-0 Alliance is not only an invitation to be part of an alliance, but a challenge on how we can build a new culture that can transform the thinking, the ways of doing, on how to really connect those bright spots. And in the process, we slowly die to ourselves so that we can build the common good. Things that we need to unlearn, hopefully in the next 2 days, we will begin to build that dream. And beyond, we journey together. So it's about the now generation, the us, and the next generation, the younger ones. Those who will be decision makers in your organization 10 years from now. Those aspiring university students becoming engineers, CEOs, entrepreneurs in the next 10 years. 000 challenges us to connect those dots. 000 inspire us to put value to zero. Of which I sometimes ask, what's the purpose of zero? I believe zero was introduced to us, to our thinking, not because it has no value, but because it adds value. It adds value to 1, it becomes 10. It adds value to 10, it becomes 100. But the 0 simply means we connect. We try to be less of self so that we can build a better future for the common good. As we say in Filipino, kasali kami dyan, we are part of it. And sa mga nakikinig na mga Pilipino, kasi alam ko this is broadcasted, this is an aspirational for us that someone or a group from the South will have a voice in the North. So maraming salamat at mapagkalingang hapon sa ating lahat. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. At least I know some French.
Good morning.
It's been a long time indeed that I haven't received a thing like that. So it's a real pleasure and an honor to be part of this opening session for the first 3-0 Alliance Forum. When I woke up this morning, I felt that I would like to share with you a little story of why I'm here and how I met ACTED, the Convergences and the 3-0 Alliance, which was in the making then. It was just 3 years ago, only 3 years ago, before COVID. And I came here because a member of the General Assembly of Convergences, Jean-Luc Perron, who I see in the room, had visited us in Delphi, where we were starting Delphi in Greece, okay, the place of the oracle, you know. Jean-Luc had visited us in Delphi and asked me to join this forum, to discover it, in fact, because I didn't know about it. So when I walked into this room 3 years ago, I found two things that were of particular interest to me. The first was that I didn't need to choose anymore between social inclusion, injustices, fighting poverty, and taking care of the environment. Because when I started working in the Global South, something like 20 years ago, for an NGO called ActionAid, back then I remember I had some second thoughts. Was I making the right choice? Was really fighting poverty and injustices and working for social inclusion more important than fighting climate change and taking care of our environment? I wasn't so sure. So it was a great relief to understand over the years that those two things go together, that there are those two sides of a same coin. But then I found something else in convergences, this deep conviction that nobody was going to succeed alone. The civil society, which I represented in my country, Greece, needed the corporate sector, and we all needed the public sector, and we certainly need academia, and we need the media, and we need everybody, because we are talking here about a profound cultural, civilizational change. The transformation we are talking about, this idea of a 3.0 world, means in fact another civilizational model. So I immediately knew that I wanted to bring convergences to Greece. And this is what I said to Frédéric when we first met in his small office close to La Madeleine. I said, look, I want to create convergences in Greece. We will call it siglissis. That would be the Greek word. And he said, fine, that's good, but I'm interested in something else. What are you doing up there in Delphi? What are you doing there in your mountains? What is this idea of a World Human Forum? And I said, well, it's complicated. We're still working on the concept, but it is certainly more than what you do here. He said, what do you mean by more? I said, well, you are working on two dimensions, the social and economic one, and then the environmental. We are adding a third dimension. And that third dimension is about what one could call values, purpose. It includes spirituality, philosophy, psychology, well-being. I remember Frédéric looking at me and telling me, oh, so you are talking to the gurus of this world. He said it in French, vous vous intéressez aux gourous. And I said, yes, I am, and I think we should all, because they are speaking to our hearts, and we should not forget that we are not rational animals. We humans are not rational animals. If we were, we would not create the mess we have created on our only planet we know. So I profoundly felt that we needed that third dimension. 9 months later, we all met in Greece again. Thibaut was with us, Frédéric was there, and we launched Convergences Forum Siglissis. But just before that, we had been again up in Delphi, in the mountains, the place of the oracle, the place that for hundreds of years was probably a place for dialogue and respect for diversity and plurality, a place where humans from all over the Mediterranean were going to find some wisdom. They were coming from Rome and from Egypt and from Persia and of course from all over Greece. And that lasted for hundreds of years. Delphi was called by historians probably the first UN. It was an amphictyonia. It didn't belong to anybody. It was a third space, a neutral space, a place where enemies could meet and talk and dialogue. And this is what brought us to Delphi, because that's what we profoundly believe is necessary in the world of today. A new place of reference where we humans can meet in all our diversity and ask ourselves the big questions, because the big questions are more than political, social, and environmental. They are about our values. They are about purpose for us. They are about what makes us happy, why we are doing all this. And there are many answers in what we call the other AI, the ancestral intelligence element. In Delphi, on the temple of Apollo, was written, Gnosis eαυτόν, know thyself, connais-toi toi-même. And that's a very, very big wisdom that we tend to forget. And also, there are other maxims in Delphi. There is μηδέν άγαν, nothing in excess. What about our societies today? Are we in excess or not? We probably are when it comes to material goods, and we are probably not when it comes to human relations, to love, to compassion, to that part of what it means to be human. So yes, it was in Delphi we wanted to meet, and it was there that we developed our own sense-making tool, as we call it, and it's that. It's that little cube. So if you think you know it, then I'm going to ask you, as Louise said, to unlearn what you know, because what you know is probably very wrong. This little cube tells us that you are going to win if you separate the colors of the sides, if blue goes with blue and green goes with green. But we believe it's exactly the contrary. What we need to do is what Frédéric said, and Louise and Thibault, we need to connect the dots. We need to break out of our silos. And if you look at this cube, and we have 6 sides here, if the first side is sustainability, then for us, the second side is about democracy. Because we don't believe that we will succeed in creating a sustainable economy without democracy, without allowing everybody to be part of the transformation, everyone to be part of the change. But in order for citizens to be able to be agents of change, we need the third side of our cube, and that's about education. Unless we change our educational model profoundly, unless we unlearn what we know and think new, maybe with Yuval Harari, who tells us that what we need is an education around the 4 C's, the letter C, ABC. He speaks about the importance of cooperation, of communication, of critical thinking, of creativity. Allow me to add a 5th C, compassion. So if education were about all that, it would help the 4th side of our cube, which is about inner development, inner transformation. Maybe we are not able today and tomorrow to create the new systems we need, the new political systems, the new economic systems, but we are certainly able, all of us, to change ourselves, to transform ourselves first. This is what Gandhi was telling us, be the change you want to see. So this inner transformation is important, and most of the people who work in the transformation system forget about it. And it's important to recognize that. So let me share a piece of good news here. There are some people in Sweden right now who are working on what they call the inner development goals. We all know the sustainable development goals, but what they argue is that we won't succeed the Sustainable Development Goals agenda unless we integrate the inner development goals. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be either or, it's going to be both together. This is what we need. But my cube still has only 4 sides, and as you know, a cube has 6 sides. So the last 2 sides are one side technology and the other the arts. And this is important again, because without technology, we won't succeed. And I want to speak to all those who suffer today from technophobia. Of course, we need technology with a humane motivation. Of course, technology is a necessary condition. Technological progress is going to solve most of our problems. It is a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient one. So unless technology is linked to all the rest, it might lead us in the wrong direction. And the last side of our cube is the arts. Yes, because again, it speaks to our hearts. Music, poetry, beauty, films, everything that makes us feel human and makes us connect better to ourselves, to others, and to nature, of which we are a part. So I will finish by saying that very clearly...
In Greek, maybe?
Sorry?
In Greek, maybe?
Maybe I know. I'll just say something still in English. My Greek friends will forgive me. So I would like to finish by saying that in order to achieve a 3.0 world, which we call actually at the World Human Forum a life-affirming ecological civilization, we need for sure the methodology of convergences, but we also need the methodology of that little cube. So I thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see many of you in Greece when we are going in Athens to make our second Convergences Forum post-COVID at the end of January 22. Thank you very much. Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Thank you very much to the three of you. Thank you very much for being our partner, co-founder, the pioneer of the 3-0 Global Alliance. And we really, really hope that all of us here in Paris and all of us in the world will actually continue. And don't lose the Rubik Cube, 3-0 Rubik Cube. Thank you very much. I'm now calling Mrs. Olivia Grégoire, please. And I switch back in French. Secrétaire.
She's the Secretary of State with the Minister of Economics, Finances and Recovery, in charge of social economics, solidarity and integration. Welcome to the World Forum 000. Thank you very much. It must show on my face I'm extremely glad to be here among you with personalities which make a difference. The world is full of people who speak up, and it's glad to be among you who act towards the reduction of the carbon print in the world, and it's written on the screen, and to reduce poverty and against greed, I would say. It's a real pleasure to be here for this, the beginning of the school year for the youngest and for us adults. And while preparing these few words with my associates, I know someone who will be touched by my words. I thought to myself, 000, it reminds me of something. It's a slogan of joy, immense joy that those who are not 20 years old won't remember what it the allusion, but for them, the youngest, for the youth, it could be really a motive for working together. So 0 carbon, 0 poverty, and the inclusion. We are far from reaching this goal. You've just said it very well, Mrs. Itsataki.
Social and environment. Je crois que c'est un des grands enjeux.
I think it's one of the great goals at stake, which mobilizes me at Bercy, the Ministry of Finance, heading this new Secretary of State, which has been created by the President himself. Speaking of solidarity, which is an ancient action within the French government, but we've added a little thing to take up the challenges of responsible economic, and my sincere ambition, which I share with the rest of the government, to contribute to the socialization of capitalism. I really believe that even if we haven't reached the goal, the path is still longer. We need to be realistic, and I know you are, but we are on the right track here. The environmental challenge is currently the most urgent, and if we don't take it up, we are convergence is been working towards. It's the environmental challenges finally being acknowledged by all governments in the world since the Paris Agreement in 2015, an agreement which seemed unthinkable only 10 years ago when the heads of state and government had parted with a failure in Copenhagen. Today, a growing number of countries, among them France, have set this goal of the zero carbon in a seeable future. We are speaking of 2,000 laws and public policies serving the environment among the world. It's the convergence of those 2,000 public policies and the convergence of goals. The efforts we've been doing for years are beginning to give some results. The world demand of carbon has been reduced by 5% in 2020. It's highest reduction since the World War II. The use of carbon has been halved in 5 years in Europe. Last July, China has followed Europe about the carbon market, and 2 days ago, we know that leaded petrol has been eradicated from this planet. Of course, I hear those who are impatient and those who grumble. It would be only a drop of water in the ocean on the scale of what remains to be done. I won't argue, they're right. It's only a drop of water in the ocean. But with those many drops of water which accumulate and intensify and multiply, if we add all the efforts of all countries and continents, will enable us to make some progress toward this goal that you've been carrying for decades. With the Climate and Resilience Act, which is being carried out and promulgated a few days ago in France, this country intends to show in its own territory what could be done concretely and efficiently. Those who grumble when I was a member of parliament, they would say that there were only drops in the ocean. But this law is very interesting, not only for its umbrella title, climate resilience. It doesn't move me. What moves me is the title of each chapter of this law, to be able to find a home, to produce, to work, to be able to move yourself about. In each item of your daily life, when you get up from your bed and go to bed in the evening, this law is a series of milestones for changes along time, so that our individual practices in our daily life, when consuming, is at the very heart of the goals at stake, and that those goals can evolve. The environmental challenge today is complex, and you all said it, and you've been championing this for years now. You're not alone. I'm learning a lot. It's not a long. I'm not in politics for a long time. I was at the General Assembly. I was a deputy of the Prime Minister, and the carbon tax has been suspended in France. So we need to learn in life, not only in politics, from your own mistakes and from the difficulties and from your failures sometimes. And I kept a very clear lesson. Ecological transition won't happen without or against social transition. The likeliness of people to accept policies and the ability of government to gather people around their politics is a priority. If we speak of green growth, it means because we need to be lucid. Growth today is the single mechanism we know that can ensure the prosperity of peoples, of all peoples and of the whole population within each country, without any exception. A simple and attracting principle as the carbon tax can be counterproductive if it is implemented without guaranteeing that the population agrees with it. It's hard lesson that I've learned in the parliament, and I remember it when I was a member of the government. Should raise a flag for us within the government. Common is pivotal, but social exclusion is too. Winter, in spite of all who favor growth, who write well, but which carry illusions. A green country can be an empty country. It's not enough to say that polluting industries are forbidden. You also need to support the conversion, modernization of industrial sites towards green economy. It's not enough to forbid the fossil fuel cars, but on the industrial side, you need to turn electric cars affordable and to reduce taxes on those electric cars, because taxes always hit the poorest the hardest way. Which has struck me all those recent years. You can't condemn people for obsolescence and let industries work alone towards this ecological transition. You need to accompany them and help them with measures so that on the industrial sides you can win allies and not adversaries. This list is very long. I could spend one whole hour describing those items. Decrees are not enough. We need to follow and accompany men and women on this path. So what are the means toward these transitions and the incentives we can implement? And without hesitation, the answer is state should help. But not only the state, and you quoted it, all of you, in the introduction. No change alone. The state first, yes, but together with companies, with the civil society, and with the NGOs. The private market, as long as it is open and regulated, can carry this change. It is politically incorrect to say it, but the market has been adapting. You can put the blame on capitalism for all its downsides. However, we should not forget its successes, what the market has enabled. Quoting Churchill, and it's the worst economic regimen, but there are no others. What can we say about the destiny of countries which have seen the rise of the middle classes, which have made it from poverty and enabled their children to go to school? How to understand the exceptional acceleration and improvement of the condition of women, which have been held for centuries, not to say for thousands of years, in an inferior position. We still have progress to make, but unmistakably you can transvestite reality, but capitalism has been for decades rather serving the emancipation of women and not against it, and improve the situation of children and child education, even if it's politically incorrect to state that. I want to reaffirm it because I strongly believe that capitalism, since it has been the biggest drive in the transformation of societies, can still help those very societies. I think we share this point of view that it's extreme financialization and its downsides, leaving the market alone, thinking that the path towards sustainable economy was easy. With the Human Development Index calculated from the human revenue and from education, its priorities and its measures were those of the 1990s, and its priorities have progressed ever since. From 0.590 in 1990 to 0.737 in 2019, a rise of 1/4 of this index. Yes, the world has changed since 1990. We can no longer measure the level of revenue only with the country's GDP without considering the good health and the development, without taking into account its sustainability. We're going to stress this during the next presidency of the Council of the EU. As a Secretary of State, I will strongly carry the responsible economy and the accountability of the economy on behalf of the President of the Republic, and it will be one of the priorities of the French presidency of the EU Council over the next semester. This modernization and capitalism goes through the modernization and sustainability of our companies. In the coming month, by 2024, not within the next 20 years, but within the next 3 years, all European companies will be incentivized to publish transparent accounts on their progress, on their extra financial performance. I will publish indexes on their concrete impacts with numbers in matter of social, environmental, and governance aspects. So zero carbon, zero exclusion, zero poverty, it's only a part of it. And it's what makes such an event pivotal to let other solutions emerge, shared by all participants. But we share this point of view to improve both the environment and social condition. I spoke these very words a few days ago. It's been a controversy, and I'm going to repeat these words. I'm a woman from humanities, and I love literature. And I'm rather sincere, which is not an upside when you work in politics. But I think it's high time to go beyond the so-called sincerity of companies and social society. And now, to give concrete numbers, the time of word has passed 20 years ago. To show commitments, we need to show data. It's only a part of the solution against zero carbon, zero exclusion, zero poverty, but it's an answer which shouldn't be neglected. I know I can count on dynamism which has preceded me and which follow me about commitment of all the Frederics, if I may, of NGOs like ACTED, involved long before my tenure, and which follow me to gather towards these social and environmental goals. Convergence will guarantee, and I thank them for this, will co-chair our work group on the governance on Pact for Impact, which gather, as you know, countries from all the continents to advance world acknowledgement of social economy with different names and realities, does answer the challenges of our economy with a more social stress and a stress on solidarity, like 000 Forum. Pact for Impact builds on the will of individual and countries. Tocqueville said it better than me. There is nothing that the human will power cannot attain through the collective power of individuals. Discovering the name of this forum, Convergence, which has become 000, another name came to my mind. This of a classical work of the anti-totalitarian Zero and the Infinite by Arthur Koestler. In this book against Stalinism, the author realized that both the individual and the party. I like to end with a strong conviction: the individual must be the infinite, because it is within each individual, each one of us, that lies the power of change. The man is the measure of everything. This quote comes from Protagoras, not from this century. It comes from the Greek, and you should remember this. The man should be at the center, or become again the center of everything. It's with this message of hope and sincere thank you for your commitment that I wish to launch the already very inspiring exchange that will drive you along those 2 days. You can count on my total commitment, of course, today, but in the following days and months also, serving a more responsible economy where man becomes or remains the measure of everything. A good forum to you all, and thank you wholeheartedly for your respective individual and collective commitment.
Merci.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you very much. Now I will call other speakers to join me. Fanny, my colleague and deputy member, and I'll give the floor to Fanny. Thank you, Thibault. Thank you, everyone, for these very inspiring introducing speeches. They announce a moment for action during this forum. So without further ado, I'll suggest that we take some time to discuss with actors that have understood that the time for words, the time to speak is over, and now it's high time to act. So I will invite 4 persons to join me here. I would like to ask Mamba Souare to come and join me here on this stage. And thank you, Mamba, for coming from Dakar all the way from, you've traveled all the night to join us. Mamba, you are the co-founder of the consortium Youth Senegal, but also you've founded the network Make Sense Africa. You're the co-founder of Make Sense Africa. Also, I have the honor to have Romina Amini. Good morning, Romina. Romina, you're the director of the Center WISE Center at the OECD in Paris. I'm very pleased to have you with us, and I hope you're ready for these 2 days of action. And also, I will invite a very committed actor, Nathan Métainier, if you will join us on the stage. Good morning, Nathan. Nathan, you are a student. You are engaged with several networks, especially when it comes to climate stakes, and you're a counselor with the UN. So thank you to all of you, and to end this roundtable, Arnaud Ngatsha will join us to close this roundtable, this first roundtable. So, Ngatsha, you're the deputy to the mayor of Paris, especially when it comes to the French-speaking matters, Francophonia. So, according to you, what are the society models that can be achievable and wishable, that are wishable for the next few years? So what is your question again? well, a society model that we wish to have can be, for instance, a model of society where we'll all be able to adapt to this major stake, namely the climate change. We can see that our societies have to face this huge challenge with all what it involves when it comes to the economy, but also the way we tackle society, the way we tackle also the way we live all together. And when we're director responsible of a big city like Paris, it also shows, the answer is also how we're going to bring solutions to those living in Paris. Nathan, what is this kind of society for which you're committing? Thank you for your invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. I'm happy to be here to speak about the future we wish for. And in my work, in my actions as an activist, as a representative of different movements of European youths and counselor to the Secretary General of the UN, I'll say that we're in a dead end. Especially when we see that the main decision makers in the world feel they are facing a barrier, major barrier, especially as when someone like me is 22 and has the feeling that everything is facing a huge barrier. So it's about going further than just looking into the name of the different acts, the different laws. And for instance, the law related to climate and resilience, it's related to the greenhouse effect. And even the EU requires us to achieve 55%. And indeed, when we read this law in detail, we would realize that it's absolutely in adequacy with the future we wish for. And beyond the climate change matter, I'm interested also.
This are part of the decision-making processes. And therefore, we need people from marginalized communities here in Europe, here in France as well. We need to acknowledge that communities, for example, from BIPOC, with Black, with second, third generation of migrants, are part of decision-making processes. Because in our societies, those who are the most impacted by the climate crisis and environmental injustices are often the most marginalized. Those coming from LGBTQI plus communities, and also those who are always impacted by our policies in Europe, may it be in the Western Balkans, in the Black Sea region, in Russia, or also our indigenous folks in the north of Europe. Yes, we have indigenous folks who are both facing inequalities and racism and exclusion by our very own governments, and facing also at the same time the climate crisis. So, pour ces futurs souhaitables, je souhaite qu'on écoute davantage.
So for this future that we wish for, I would like these communities to be taken into account even more, to have them at the core of the decision-making processes, because the youth voices are the allies of these movements. And I think that in this way we'll achieve successfully to these objectives in a more beautiful way, if I may. Robina, I'm turning to you now. What is the society for which you're working on a daily basis? So I work at the OECD for the mission of this forum, so there's a very good convergence already. So the mission is to imagine societies and economies, and I will insist on the economic aspects of this issue. And we've heard so far of the necessity to act urgently, because we didn't do enough. So what this means for us, it means that we want economies that are fair and inclusive, economies that are open but also focused on mankind and persons. And Alexandra said in the first session, told us about this concept of well-being, of psychological well-being, because it's not only about the society but also the mental aspect, the sense, these things. All these were impacted by the pandemic. And at the OECD, we work on these things in an integrated way with the person back to the core of all these issues, of all these matters, of all these solutions, with the reduction of inequalities. And this, of course, was important before the pandemic, but it's even more the case, even more important after the pandemic, to avoid exclusion. But also it's about the participative aspect. As Nathan said, it's very interesting because we carried out surveys, studies, and when you look into the different OECD countries, there are about 30% of the population thinking that they're at the margin of the public decision making. A third of the households had to undergo major financial difficulties, but also there's a kind of alienation, if I can call it this way. So that's why I agree with the fact that participative, this concept is very important. Thank you so much, Robina, and we'll come back on this sectorial sector combination. Mamba, over to you. What is your 2030? How do you wish it to be like? I think that my 2030 is the 2030 that everyone wish for. Because I think that most of us here are older and younger than 30 years old. And as for those who are younger than 30, we want to think of what would be good for them. So the emergency now shows to us that we have to act. And personally, I'm very pleased to see the areas where we act that the youth is not waiting for anybody anymore. They're acting now at their level. They're acting. But also, at the same time, I have hopes. But at the same time, again, when I look into the framework, the context where we're intervening, which is not structured, the actors who are supposed to facilitate things are not committing, are not engaging. And therefore, the youth movements won't go far. For instance, with Make Sense, we have a clear 2030 vision, namely to engage 10% of the population, that's our target, into the resolution of the most pressing stakes, challenges of our society, especially when it comes to the SDGs. So 10% of the population when it comes to taking up the challenges. But alone, we're not going to be successful. We need collaboration with all the different actors. As we heard, some say that everyone has to play its role, to do something. We, the young people, want to play our role, to do something, but it's limited. We have a limited margin of action. And we want to learn to work better all together, and that everyone does what they have to do at their individual level in order to work on these matters related to emergencies related to the climate, the social exclusion, and poverty. Thank you. Indeed, everyone has to do something, especially when it comes to the most urgent things. For instance, the environmental, the economic, and social challenges. So do you think that there's a priority or key challenges or stakes in order to achieve this objective or to achieve this 2030 agenda or not? Mr. Ngachai, over to you. Well, it depends where we are sitting, so to speak, because we are all actors in our own specific areas, and I can tell you what I can do as an international deputy for the city of Paris. But I listened carefully to the roundtable that just before, especially the speech from the minister. And I wish he mentioned the local authorities, because in this stake related to sustainable development, to solidarity, indeed Paris, which is the case also of the cities, we're not going to manage to take on these challenges without the participation of the main cities, who play a bigger and bigger role, not only when it comes to the civil societies, but also when it comes to transformation. For instance, in Paris, there's an action in place, and since 2018, there's a plan, climate, energy, that has been put in place, implemented, with a view to 2030, in such a way that the objectives meet these SDGs. So sometimes, because Paris is being reorganized, refurbished, the traffic is transformed, and so on. And it's a case also when it comes to the international policy, because our will is to meet the SDGs. So this is translated into cooperation that we've been put in place with a number of our international partners. In Paris is the city in the world that dedicates the biggest budget when it comes to transforming the city. Also, there's a big part of this budget dedicated to helping the migrants, and this is in relation with this notion of inclusion, hosting, welcoming migrants, and that's very important, especially for our big city, Paris. And this action goes through aid mechanisms, solidarity labels, to fund a number of actions at an international level, especially those actions related to sanitation, waste management. Last week, for instance, I received a delegation from Cameroon that came to meet me with a number of mayors from this country in order to figure out how we can help them when it comes to the implementation of public policies in their respective cities and towns, and what kind of aids we can bring them. We can give them not only financial aid, but also experience when it comes to experience. And I'm referring to the African continent because it's a key element of my roadmap. And the mayor of Paris wishes the African continent to be part of our wish to transform cities. And the African continent is a continent of the future, the continent of the future. And therefore, we want to be part of this cooperation, which is closely related with the history of France. And that's the case, at least, with Francophonia. So these cooperation agreements, but also all these things we can do in terms of international actions. We've carried out a number of actions during the COP21, for instance, and also last December at the City Hall in Paris, we've organized an event around the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement in order to come back to a number of commitments that haven't been implemented yet. And it's a shame because many commitments are taken by countries, but they're not always implemented. So tangibly, the local authority had to act very quickly because the citizens have a closer, more direct way to be in touch, to contact their representatives. And this is why very shortly we'll organize at the City Hall of Paris an event related to the forests of Africa, and NGOs, researchers, scientists will take part to that. They will think, we will be all thinking on this subject, and we'll try and find solutions. We'll try and have the different actors working on these subjects discuss together. And last item, the youth, because I think the youth play a key role. And alas, I'm not part of the youth anymore, but we're working hard in such a way that the young people can live in this world that is coming to them, and this world will be very complex, I'm afraid, due to the different changes, the rivalries existing, and this is what we can say, that's what we can see, especially with what is taking place in Afghanistan. The world is changing indeed. But through communication, we're very close to what is taking place in the world, and this is an echo to all the things we want to do, and the youth want change. They don't want to be living in a world that they didn't create, so to speak. So as political responsibles, we have to listen carefully to the youth. Therefore, we put in place tools and mechanisms in order to work with the younger ones. And this is the purpose of the Academy of the Climate. It's not going to be a conference center, but rather a place where the people living in Paris will be able to train themselves on the stakes related to environmental transition, but also solidarity and equality. And you're very right to mention the matter related to the LGBTQI+. And this is very important, this matter related to the minorities, the integration of the differences. These are subjects that the youth wants to take into account. They want a world where these matters are taken into account, including the specificities, the minorities. So this is an overview of the current situation of what we're doing. Indeed, the 6th of October, the Académie du Climat on the environmental transition. Robina, can you tell us more about the whys in terms of analysis, in terms of theory? So what is this cross-sector? What does it consist in? I would like to highlight 3 priorities, and I will add on what we heard just before. So we carry a number of analysis at the OECD, and WISE is a part of it. And so conceptualization, that's what we work about as well. However, we want to base ourselves on the same definition, and we've realized that it's very important. We had to frame the issue and mobilize the right data. So there's a lot of research done in a number of OECD countries, but also at an international level. There is not one doctrine that will define the right way to do things. We want to base ourselves on figures. So we worked on this project. We've published the result of these studies recently. And from this analysis, showing that there's a strong relationship between inequalities and climate change. From this analysis, showing that health of the most fragile people is more impacted by the degradation of nature, the environment, and climate change. For instance, the elderly people, the children, especially the children who live in houses that are not the best living conditions. But also, it's also related to professional levels, because there are specific industries that are impacted by all that. So just to let you know that the cost related to climate change, the non-action cost, is not distributed properly. So it's very focused on this category, on this class of people. Also, this kind of people. Also, if we want to change, another thing that is that if we really want to change the system, we can't impose the cost of a part of the population. For instance, environment transition is also a social transition. So there are OECD countries where we've noted that there are huge level of energy-related poverty, and these households will find it the most difficult to be able to face, to meet their key needs, their essential needs. And these households will be also the most impacted by the change in the system. And they will be required to change their renewable, to switch to renewable energies and so on. So for them, we want first, in the first place, think of how to have them including in this environment and social transition. And it's based on a conciliation, namely thinking of solutions right from the onset in the chain of the political system in such a way that all these objectives will be put together. So when we started to talk about the sustainable change, sustainable development 30 or 40 years ago, we based ourselves on 3 different objectives, and everyone worked on these objectives separately. And now we're saying that these 3 objectives are actually the same objectives. So we want to work on public policies that act, that play on one, that are focused on these 3 objectives put into one. So this will solve and tackle this matter related to the environment in a fair way. For instance, we want policies related to training, requalification, coaching, helping social protection in a specific way to workers working in industries that will have to do a transition towards an economy without carbon. So it's about training from the outset when we want to think about industries, sectors, areas such as schools, universities, in order to train people for professions that will be existing in the future. And also women will have to be trained on these matters, because usually we can see that women are less trained on green sectors. And all these are efforts we want to work on. It's not only about environmental protection, social protection, but also tax protection, because you can't impose a carbon tax on people. We want to think on the distributive impacts of these tax-related policies. And also it will be about offsetting or imagining, designing mechanisms or systems through offsets or compensations or vouchers for the poorest households. Now, in 2 words, if I may, because I know we want to discuss many things and I don't want to monopolize the discussion. Another axis on which we're working hard, and I'm sure this will be providing many information to some of you here, namely, for instance, finance. We've done a lot when it comes to finance. We started with the finance impact. However, finance impact, that's what we call before the social finance impact. And we can say that at the moment there are $20 trillion injected globally. So this is an investment every year. $1/5 trillion of that in order to achieve the SDGs. So we do have the capacity to implement to achieve the ambition of the SDG, this can be done with finance, and there's money remaining. So this means that we can still invest on other things. So this means that there's a huge potential there. So we want to scale up everything that has been done on the impact. And also there's a lot of things to do, again, when it comes to defining the standards, the reference. We do a lot with WISE at the OECD and also at an international level. I'm going to mention one of these things that have been created, that have been designed, developed recently, a group that measures the impact managed by the British presidency of the G7, working on the matter related to referencing, standardization, also the matter related to developing new financial solutions. And the decision was made to select one of them, namely fair transition. They could have chosen many other things in the financial impact, but they've chosen only one, namely fair transition. So in this multilateral dialogue, that's a focus on that. So when it comes to finance, there's still a lot of things to do. And when it comes to alliance, this was mentioned several times. This is the gist of our work of the OECD, namely working with the different actors, mainly in order to support the public and political decision. But also we work more and more with the companies. During the French presidency of the G7, we worked on that, and we'd like to greet these companies companies that are here today. We are working with them, and we are working on these conceptual tools, creating the OECD, being part of the OECD, the work of the OECD, and for instance, where there's a working group, and especially when it comes to this fair transition. And the companies raise this question: how to change the production models in a global way? What are the impacts? Who are the workers? So we're going to review the definition of the different competencies, how to avoid concentration over the markets, and so on, and also how it's possible to better serve the stakeholders, the goods and services that will be accessible, especially when it comes to green economy and accessibility in a wide dimension for the parts of the population that are the poorest. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll have a lot to share still. You said that being an activist is not to be interested by data, but I think that Bomba and Nathan are interested in this part of the work, to give a priority in your commitment and on these roadmaps and analysis who are shared by Romina and Noen Gacha. Do you join efforts? Do you recognize yourself in our words? If you get associated with, as a matter of fact, we are still involved with these questions. As a youth, as a member of the young, we prioritize the issues of the young. We're trying to follow the young. We've carried out a study 2 years ago in 2 countries, in Senegal and Côte d'Ivoire, in order to understand the situation of the young. The topic was the youth. So thanks to those 2 studies, 2 issues that are worrying the youth: participation and insertion. So we've involved 174 youth organizations on the ground in the 14 regions of Senegal. And the information that we have been able to gather thanks to those studies, they say that they're not trained enough, and that the training they've received are not adapted to the reality of the market. So 1 young Senegalese out of 2 hasn't been schooled. Second, the participation. They are not included anywhere, be it on the legislative side, be it on you've got 1 or 2 younger than 35 years old, which is involved in politics. Today, the question of migration, Africa has long been considered as the problematic continent. But paradoxically, I come from a region in Senegal where there are a lot of natural resources which are currently exploited, and among the young from those regions are much more committed, interested by illegal migration. I know a few young people who have perished trying to cross the sea. So training and participation are pivotal issues, and we are committing to those goals. It is a priority for us. It's highly complex, but as an organization, among those studies, we have a champion organization who have embraced these causes through their tools and methodologies. We've created the consortium Youth Senegal. I will go into details how we created this consortium because there is a specific workshop on this afternoon. But just to remember you, each environment has its priorities. Ours are to try to identify who are the young who are shaping future, to take them into account, both socially, social solidarity and economic sustainability. So participation of the youth, some are giving a tour to try to get involved youth in the elections on the city level. So to be able to be a candidate, you need 15 million. We are jobless. We don't have 15 million. But don't worry, we're going to find solutions. We're trying to organize the youth so that each one of them can gather 1,500 euros, 15 million of their local currency, so that they can take their decision and take part in this political process. Without this youth, the future is made against it. So those who decide today that in 30 years' time they won't be here again. If you don't associate us, how do you want to solve those problems? So there are some efforts being made. Yes, efforts are being made. 50 years ago, there was no legal framework in Senegal when I came, because I believed in this citizen movement, which is shown some results, and I've known them from Paris. And when I brought this movement in Senegal, there was no legal framework for us. On the last June the 4th, we have a law, and I've contributed a lot to reach one. Companies were oriented to the maximization of profit, but the large companies today work with us in the building sector for transition for a low-carbon economy. And to close my speech, the question of training. Today we launch trainings that come from the 60s. We've got our diploma. The African people with the greatest diplomas, they can't find work. So the solution to this is the entrepreneurship is one of the solutions. Not the solution, but it's one of the solutions. But there are some hurdles. Senegalese banks, for instance, support for the young entrepreneurs because there is no legal framework supporting them. We have a hard time to recruit competent people for the human resources, for instance, because we can't pay them. How can we guarantee the survival of our organization if we don't have resources and financial organizations, either public or private, and there is no legal framework which gives us an incentive. So it's discouraging. But thanks to the strength of this coalition, which is starting to listen to us and to become aware of what we're doing, because we have made it clear that we want this future for ourselves and for the continent. So they need to listen to us. We need to train, and they need to modernize their training models. And together we need to find solutions to offer jobs and hope to those young. These are our priorities. Now, in Paris, you may have your priorities. In Mexico, they have others. But at the very bottom, if each one of us does its part, we can reach a desirable and sustainable future for all. That's what I wanted to share with you. Each one knows what he or she has to do, and stress the importance of dialogue, but cross-sector dialogue. There is a lot of things which are being taken at the scale of, on the scale of cities and on a global scale. Nathan, a quick transition to the next subject. We'd like briefly to speak about this link with the institutional framework on the one hand, and on the other hand, the efficiency and the swiftness with which the actions are being taken. You've got one foot in both sides, if you can name them, with the UN and with the EU network of the young. So I'd like to contextualize this question with the report by the environmental experts. The young on one side and the rest of the world on the other side, or can we work together? Thanks for mentioning the Academy, the Climate Academy. It has all my support, and I hope it will be in favor of the young from the low and middle income neighborhoods, and I hope there will be convergence around this. Everyone has seen that. It was a very sad summer, actually, with very difficult news. And I joined in August, and we had a meeting with the Secretary General of the UN, as we have regularly, and I asked the question with the people in charge, and how could you publish the expert reports on August the 8th when we all are resting? And her answer was very clear. Because when people are on holiday, they read news. So it's a reality. It's a result of the reality. We are lagging behind the world by 2030. It's very different from today's. But it's not my. I don't want to explain to everybody the situation in which we're going to reach by 2030. But what interests me much in this French context, I seldom speak up in France, and you say there will be some meetings about the protection of nature. This is especially interesting. France is a colonial state, and this is a reality. Wealth, the way we develop internationally, is still impregnated by these colonial relationships of domination. And this is very important to discuss this in France, and extremely important to discuss this in this forum, which gathers players from the development world. Let's take the instance of the protection of nature. Next week, there is the Summit on Nature in Marseille, in southern France, which is a very good venue to discuss those issues. And the way we've protected nature has often been done against the local populations, which we also call the indigenous populations. And we've created large natural reserves. In Africa, there are very large reserves. In your country too, in Senegal. But renegating the natural right of those indigenous populations to live on site. But large NGOs like WWF are still supporting initiatives in this direction. Why do I quote this example? Because to show you, even if you want to good, you duplicate your bad policies. If you want to more ambitious climate policies, for more ambitious policies on biodiversity, you need to wear social justice glasses. Otherwise, you're going to reproduce those social inequalities. This is my struggle on the ground, trying to to fund my initiative. This is what activism is about. You can both speak to high-level decision makers. You can't just speak of adaptation when you speak about climate, but you need to go towards local communities and help them fund their work. That's what we do in Europe. We don't do this in the rest of the world because we're convinced that the situation of certain local situations in the Balkans, in the Black Sea, or in Eastern Europe, and nobody is interested in these countries. It's a struggle. It's a fight in Brazil, in Sudan, and in India. I just wanted to share this idea because I think it's of the utmost importance, and I invite you to always question yourself. What I'm doing in my industry, in my business, in my NGO, am I not reproducing in social inequalities? Thank you very much. Nathan, you stress the importance of the complementarity of social actions and going out of our neighborhoods, crossing borders, but also on the global scale. Time is flying, but I like to ask each one of you if you have a conclusion, brief conclusion, and a message you'd like to carry out to the crowd gathered here and online. For the rest of this forum, we have, of course, the opportunity to forward these exchanges along the next 2 days. Mr. Ngacha, I'm a politician, so I'm not repeating the words by Nathan. But what is interesting in what since you addressed me casually, this new way of understanding the situation with a series of countries with which France had a relationship of colonialism. This is interesting because if we want to progress, we need to take each country in particular. About forest, I had a word with the ambassador of Gabon, and she said to me, you know, Mr. Gacha, the problem is not in the big cities, but how are you going to explain to the Gabonese, which has his little slope of land, exploiting his trees, that he shouldn't fell them, and how is he going to live? You need to sympathize and to try to explain them the great plan and to take into account their livelihoods. That's what we're trying to do in international cooperation. You need to listen to people. You don't impose things. You don't say do this or that. We need to listen to local needs. And I think you're totally right on this. I'll end my contribution speaking about women, if you allow me to do so. Yes, please, do. Because it's very meaningful in the diplomacy in Paris and is a part of what we're speaking about a more just society and more inclusive regarding the equality between men and women. It's a topic which is dear to my heart, and I think it's good that a man could choose this topic as his dearest issue. I think this issue will be mature when men will consider they can carry it as good as women would do. It's important for the equality between all, and that this equality between men and women is being taken care of independently from our gender. So I'm very proud of it. Thanks, Ngacha, for your involvement and citizen. So I'm going to the issue of reproducing inequalities, it's dear to me from the point of view of power also, because what Nathan was implicitly saying, very often it's a question of power behind it, which is distributed unequally. This is at the heart of social equality and governance. We want to progress on SDGs. We've created a framework and a very complex architecture. We have considered everything. However, this global framework still remains is still lacking equality. We need to support the civil society organization, the instances representing the minorities, the young, or we will not make any progress. Finally, as a conclusion or as a start, I don't know. I think within this palace and the players we always speak about the supply of help, but let's think about the demand. If each one of us could think about how sustain the demand, it's job of activists anyway, but we could trigger those dynamic processes. A movement, we don't only need to solve the problems, so we need to, it's a constant urgency. We need to change even needs. And it addresses the question of demand. And to question our reflexes, thank you, Romina. Thank you to Mumba. What is your last-minute message and your inspiration following this roundtable? Is to believe in the youth, whichever way is organizing, to become a new strength, and which will suggest a concrete and efficient solution and experiment them on the ground, which will be more cost efficient, which would address several problems and address them directly, and also to try to gather collaboration. Those issues have become so complex that people separately cannot solve them. I think that this forum is a very good framework, a good start, and could strengthen collaboration among several players. Thank you, Mumba. Nathan, last word? Yes, two things. I totally agree with you. We need to commit to this dialogue, but this dialogue needs to be sincere. I'm almost co-chairing the COP26 in Milan preparation. I was reading that the Minister of the Environment are calling us very radical environmentalists. So it's dedicated to commit to this dialogue, even at the very highest level. Very briefly, this is really pivotal. You need to have an empathic approach, empathy while working. It's good on the paper, but what we do in reality and concretely, we could create spaces full of diversity and empathy, and it should involve political decision makers, and there are very few of them who within their staff have black people, migrants from the second or third generations, or people from the LGBTIQ plus community. We need this diversity to commit ourselves and prepare the world of tomorrow. So an approach with leadership, with empathy, and to commit ourselves in our work and our company, and it goes through hiring with positive discrimination, even if it's anti-constitutional within this country. Thank you to each one of you to have joined us this morning. To close this opening ceremony, I would like to pick up on a live tweet I've seen. And the initiatives we've seen is a drops of water compared to the objective we have for 2030. To strike a different note and to show some hope and some results, I'm very pleased to welcome Adélaïde Charlier, who comes directly from Belgium. Thank you for joining us today. She's coordinating the movement Climate Belgium, and she's going to tell more about her path. Good morning. My name is Adelaide Charlier. I'm 20 years old. I'm a Belgian. It's not necessarily a problem. Today we insist a lot on the differences between us. Each one of us has some idiosyncrasies. We all have different pasts. We commit differently. We have different relatives, but I'm not here to deny all of this. I came here today to say that beyond our differences, it is important to see what is common among us. When I was 18, I felt strongly several things that we, the young, from here, from anywhere else, what we share in common. The impacts of climate change, of global heating, the extinction of biodiversity. This is an economic system which is doomed. With 18 years old, I went to the streets with Belgian young. We organized school strikes to drive the attention on climate. It was in 2019, and this is when I became an activist. You'll say, yes, an activist will frighten some of you and can thrill others. This is a word to be taken seriously. It only means to be active. Because to start with, I know what the scientists are telling us about the future. The IPCC report, which has been published this summer, global heating is due to human activity, which is already impacting and will growingly impact the living, and will be the generation will have to face consequences. Secondly, I hear we can act and delay consequences, and the solutions exist. Among them, our personal attitude towards consuming, but most of all, political and economic decisions to be taken, and which are necessary to reduce CO2 emissions. And also see that those decisions are not assumed by enough economic and political players. These decisions, however, have to do with your future. The IPCC has said it, the decisions we won't take today will increase the climate catastrophes, which will be very expensive to our generation. I feel concerned with this future because I don't want to say to myself when I'll be 30 or 40 years old that I knew it, but I did nothing. Given that I'm 20 years old, I don't want to deny things. I don't want to minimize problems. I don't want to despair myself. I want to take action. And honestly, it's a choice easy to make. Since I'm 18 years old, I've met dozens of politicians, hundreds of citizens. I'm in contact with the active young around the planet. And this is super inspiring to see the energy of the young who raise and act to change things. This boosts me every morning, and this is what drove me to come here today. I can see that we, citizens, and perhaps more the young than others, have the power to say what we don't want. We have this legitimacy because it's our future which is at stake. Obviously, to be an activist, to only denounce which is not right because it is not going into the right direction, it can be very frustrating and very exhausting. Nonetheless, I can see initiatives every day on the local level, companies committing themselves socially and sustainably, and mass media which broadcast this message broadly. This social and economic future depends on us, on our changes, on our changes about consuming, on our boycotts, And to sum it all, about our resistance, about your resistance, we can become active on all levels through communication, through videos, by creating groups among our relatives or among our groups of friends or in our neighborhoods to launch projects, a way to address alternatives in farming or in public transport or commuting, or you're a teacher and you start speaking about addressing those issues with your pupils or your students, or taking advantage of a day like today to address those issues. You can make your talents into use to speak, imagine, and this world of tomorrow, which needs to start today. I believe in it. There will be this little difference which enable the great difference. Between what connects us is a common word. Climate knows no boundaries, and but to reach zero exclusion, zero carbon, and zero poverty, we absolutely need to feel that we belong to a common world. Thank you.
Un grand merci, Adélaïde.
Thank you so much, Adelaide. Thank you, everyone, for this opening session. To all of you, I wish a good World Forum 000, and I think that if we want to have a takeaway when it comes to this inauguration, the future that we are trying to build together, this 000 future, is worth fighting for. Thank you, and have a nice forum.
Je vous invite à rejoindre les salles à 11h30 et à rester là. Nous avons une session.
Well, there is a session now which is called Exiting Energy and Health-Related Precarity. A minister gives us the honor to be with us for a speech. Thank you.